Okay, good afternoon, friends and neighbors. My name is John Downing. I'm director of the Global Media Research Center, which is based in the College of Mass Communication and Media Arts. It is designed to be a research center for those interested in such topics across campus. Happy to say that one of those is Professor McCall, who is a member of our advisory committee for anthropology. The project that he is involved in is also being part of a project under development in the center. And Professor Ojewuyi at the back from theatre is another member of that august group, as is Dr. Alzuma, who's sitting right next to him, and Mr. Frimpong, who's sitting down at the corner here, plus some other people who I don't actually see at the moment, but they may turn up in a while. So that is one of the projects under development of the Global Media Research Center on Nollywood. So, Professor McCall, you've been writing about this for quite a while. It's nice to have you here. It's nice to have some people, I guess, from anthropology, because there are some faces I don't recognize here. Please come back to other sessions. And communication people don't feel that you're not welcome too. So, over to you, John. Oh,
Thank
sorry,
you.
one other thing. This is the MCMA 201 sign-up sheet for those what wants it. Instead of going this way, and if you want it, there it is.
I want to start by just showing you some movie trailers, because I have found that it goes a long way towards explaining what Nollywood, just to give you a sample. These are trailers. And as you know, what movie trailers do is take the most exciting scenes in the movie and sort of pack them all together into a few minutes. And so they sometimes have a tendency, I think particularly in Nollywood movies, to create an exaggerated sense of speed and excitement. But it should give you a pretty good idea of what Nollywood movies look like. So hopefully this will cooperate.
See the protector, the destroyer.
My pastor told me Papa made a covenant with the devil.
From that, your uncle.
You consulted a native doctor? Are you now going to dictate to me what happens in my own house?
I'm sorry.
It's not a land. You said taboo. Our generation now suffers because of the wickedness of our forefathers. Beware. Beware. Flames of the Father of Phone Collins Production. These men say, Kenneth Okonkwo, Pete Edochie, Lucy Okwene, Bruce James Uche, Larry Kunswe, Peter Ennis, and Susan Obi. You in flames of the Father. Get ready to get action.
I want to kill him and inherit his wealth.
Mind-blowing, dramatic, a complex tale, and emotional. You must see this movie. Suicide Mission. Richard Mokogamijo, Amosi Umariagwe, Regina Askia, Patrick Doyle, Obert Eto in Suicide Mission. A passionate movie, one of the very best from 1998. Produced by Sonny Collins Martin and directed by Fred Amata. Suicide Mission, distributed and marketed by Great Movies Industries Limited and AC Afasins Industries Limited, 51 Iweka Road, Onitsha. Suicide Mission. Unmistakably remarkable. Suicide Mission. The quest for riches, the quest for power, the thirst for blood. These are signs of the end time. Good becomes evil. The innocent is bewitched to cause wreck and havoc. Witches, they're strong, wicked, and supernatural. Who will stop them? Witches, they will be driven with lots of spellbound action. Starring Liz Benson, Zach Oji, Larry Coleswell, Robert Ito, and Pamela Mbebe. Witches, produced by Sonny Collins Wato, directed by Fred Amata, with visual effects on the Magic House of Market. Witches, marketed and distributed by Great Movies Industries Limited and OCI Francis Industries Limited, 51 Iweka Road, Onitsha. Witches, may their passion never be yours. Getting married to a mermaid.
How did you want to marry another lady when you know you already have a husband here?
Scores to settle. Things are happening. Things are going wrong. Things are being revealed. Scores to settle. Starring Richard Muthidamijo, Liz Benson, Omotola Jalade Kende, Patrick Doyle, Obert Etu, and Teko Benson. Scores to settle. Be very careful of whom you're getting married to. She might be one of them. Scores to settle. Distributed and marketed nationwide by Great Movies Nigeria Limited, 51 Iweka Road, Onitsha. Scores to settle. Pray you don't have scores to settle with a mermaid. It might be your worst nightmare.
She's beautiful. Unreal. She has tried her luck with marriage several times with several men. Her first fiancé died to meet her favorite. Janet's father committed an abomination in the past. Its repercussion knows no bounds. Janet Basquiat is dead and cursed from beyond. Her father will go to any length to free his daughter, who is the target of his enemies. Cursed from beyond. Starring Regina Basquiat, Roman Jacobs, Jackie Silva, Shabba Music, TJ Cole, and Robert Ito. Cursed from Beyond, produced by Sam Collins, directed by Fred Amata, marketed by Great Movies Industries Limited, OC Afasi Industries Limited, 51 Iweka Road, Onitsha. Cursed from Beyond.
I said I don't want to listen.
Hold your breath.
Okay. One of you tech guys wants to turn that off. I'm done with this, so if you can make it go away, I'm going to give my presentation. Stop apparently wasn't a clear enough message for it. I thought about the different ways I could do this, and I think I'm going to be giving a number of presentations about Nollywood over the next few semesters. And I decided today, instead of doing a kind of an analysis of any particular film or something like that, that I would attempt to give a broader introduction of the movie industry in Nigeria, and to do it ethnographically, because that's the way I like to do it. So I'm just going to read to you a portion of what I like to refer to as Chapter 1, And I'll begin by introducing you to a movie producer and student of African cinema. I sat with Kabata Sosa Ebon on the veranda of his bungalow apartment at the MacDavos Hotel in Enugu, a former coal mining center in the southeastern region of Nigeria. Enugu has become a favorite location for shooting the English language video features that are increasingly becoming popular all over Africa. The MacDavos was swarming with activity as several different movie production teams were preparing for another day's work. Kabat was a graduate student of cinema studies at University of Ibadan. A slender, energetic young man in wire-rimmed glasses, he was both critical of aspects of the video industry and also enthusiastic about its potential. Kabat was not solely an academic. He was also a well-established industry professional, a scriptwriter and director with many titles to his name. He was in Enugu working for OJ Productions as the assistant director for a movie called Ebube, Land of Tears. As an industry insider and also a scholar of cinema criticism, Kabat was in a unique position to assess the relationship of the new Nigerian video industry to the canonized works of celluloid African film. Regarding his studies of African cinema at the University of Ibadan, Kabat confided that while he had studied the work of the celebrated Francophone African filmmakers, he had never actually seen any of their films. At a time when Nigerian universities are suffering from a crippling book scarcity and lack of funding in general, they simply do not have the financial resources to obtain these expensive films that are available only from American and European distributors and must be purchased in foreign currencies. The African cinema, familiar to scholars of African studies, is shot in Africa but edited and distributed abroad. Of his schooling in African cinema at Ibadan, Kabat said, and this is a quote, "They taught us about filmmaking, of film in Africa. We learned a lot about filmmakers, Sembène Ousmane and the likes of them, but all we hear is just theory. I have never seen any of Sembène Ousmane's films, not even the popular Hwala. I have not seen it. All we hear, or what we see, is in a book. If I, with my kind of experience, have not seen things like that, then you can imagine those people in the villages." Kabat identifies one of the most profound ironies of African cinema. Unless one is able to attend an elite film event such as the famous FESPACO festival held every other year in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, opportunities to see African films in Africa are very rare. For the most part, the best films made by Africans, those that take awards at film festivals in Cannes and New York, and are a part of African studies curricula around the world, remain unavailable and unknown in Africa itself. This paradox led African film critic Emmanuel Sama to observe that, quote, African films are foreigners in their own countries. This lack of access to African films means that the canonized works of African cinema have not, in any meaningful way, participated in African cultural life. Aside from Sama's revelatory article, however, discussions of the absence of an African audience for African films have been surprisingly rare in the academic literature. While many talented African cinematographers have developed a brilliant body of art, cinema, and documentaries, they have not succeeded in producing a popular cinema, a cinema for Africa's mainstream audiences. The Nigerian video industry, however, has changed that forever. These market-driven movies are targeted to the sensibilities of their indigenous audience. And again, I quote Kabat here. These are his words. "The question one asks, is there something in these Nigerian films that we don't find in a lot of these Francophone films, which we have known to be the decimal of African filmmaking? I believe that the difference is this. The Nigerian filmmakers have been able to touch a sort of sensibility of the people, their life, their aspirations, their family values, their worldview, their cosmology, spiritual and otherwise. I think the content, the form, is African. I think this is the truly African film we have been waiting for. I think we are telling our story now for the first time." Thus, we can speak of two distinct African cinematic traditions. One, a celluloid cinema based primarily in Francophone Africa and produced by European-trained cinematographers, has gained global respect as an intellectually sophisticated, politically astute art cinema. The other, a digital video industry centered in Nigeria and Ghana, but also quickly taking root in other African countries, is a popular movie industry driven by local markets and crafted to appeal to mainstream indigenous sensibilities. For the sake of accuracy, I must mention in passing a third African cinematic tradition, South Africa's celluloid film industry. Like the Francophone art films, however, these films lack significant distribution on the continent outside of South Africa. Nollywood evolved in a market that had been disregarded not only by the distributors of African film, but also by the global media industries in general. This neglect created a free space for indigenous media to take root. A professional base of television writers, directors, technicians, and actors had been nurtured by the early and extensive development of television broadcasting in Nigeria. Government regulations requiring that a significant percentage of broadcast content must be indigenous led Nigeria's content-hungry television industry to find an ally in the robust Yoruba popular theater tradition that flourished in the Southeast. The television shows that resulted were simply produced and had a stagey look, but these homegrown melodramas rang true to viewers, and favorite titles were circulated informally on videotapes throughout the 1980s. Thus, Nigeria, always rich in storytellers, was also ripe with professional production talent, cheap televisions, and a public that craved a media culture of their own. It was an environment in which the video movie industry could flourish. The factors that transformed this small local trade in videos into the fastest growing movie industry in the world remain a matter of considerable debate. The popular origin stories of Nollywood often refer to a video entitled Zinoba that was released in Ghana in 1987 with great commercial success. The story, as industry insiders tell it, is that a Nigerian trader named Holy Rock was faced with moving a large cargo of blank videotapes. The success of Zinoba led Rock to conclude that he might sell his tapes more quickly if he recorded something on them. He recorded a Yoruba drama and took the tapes to market with success, and others followed. Another celebrated turning point for the industry was when, in 1992, an Igbo businessman named Kenneth Nebwe who had helped to finance some Yoruba productions, made the first English Igbo language video, Living in Bondage, which he claimed returned his investment 100-fold. 2 years later, Nebwe made the first English language feature, a flashy morality tale called Glamour Girls. Its extraordinary financial success is often said to have moved the industry out from the ethnic enclaves. Such accounts are part of the narrative that Nollywood tells about itself. Variants may emphasize the contributions of Ghanaians, Yoruba, Igbo, or other groups. While such origin stories have found their way into press accounts and are subsequently cited in academic renditions of the history of Nollywood, it is unwise to give too much credit to any particular individual or production. The Nollywood industry resulted from the confluence of historical conditions, advances in digital technology, and the creativity and entrepreneurial imaginations of many different people. Most important among these were the movie consumers themselves. The video vendors, assisted by aggressive advertising campaigns and a keen sense of audience demand, became the predominant traders in Idomoda market in Lagos by the mid-1990s. The popular videos are distinct in many aspects from the films canonized in African cinema studies. The content of the video is unique, and an array of genres has emerged, including horror, comedy, urban legend, mythic parable, romance, witchcraft melodrama, Christian morality tale, and historical epic. And the trailers that I showed you were kind of biased towards the horror genre, partially because that was the type of movie it was introducing, and you know how they try to match the trailers to the movie, again, in the interest of the audience. While Africa's celluloid art cinema has depended largely on foreign funding and schooling, Nigeria's video movie industry is self-sufficient and resolutely indigenous. It is now one of the most rapidly expanding sectors in the Nigerian economy. What distinguishes the Nigerian videos most, however, is their popularity. The fact that a new culture of movie watching is flourishing, and discourse about movies is beginning to serve as a forum for reflection on culture and conditions within Nigeria and indeed across Africa itself. I met young people raised in Lagos who admitted that most of what they knew about cultural practice in the villages they learned from watching the videos. During my research in the villages and cities in the Southeast in 2000 and 2002, I was struck over and over again by the way people of all walks of life referred me to the movies to explain the conditions of life in Nigeria, from the armed gangs of robbers that plague the country and the illicit traffic in captive sex workers to the fine points of indigenous cosmology and ritual practice. Indeed, even native doctors, the official custodians of traditional knowledge, directed me to the movies for examples of cultural beliefs and their consequences. Clearly, popular videos had become an integral part of Nigerian life. They are watched by millions of people. Their audience demographics transcend ethnic and economic categories, and whether they like them or not, Nigerians consider the videos to be an important new cultural forum. Ejiofor Eze-Anyechi is a quiet, unassuming man, known to most simply as OJ. His company, OJ Productions, has become one of the most prolific creators of blockbusters in Nigeria. When I first arrived at the MacDavis Hotel, his project, Ebube, was casting supporting roles. The principals and children's roles were precast, and the superstar, Pete Edochie, had already been secured for the lead role as the traditional village chief. Several hundred people were crowded in an outdoor pavilion. The hopefuls were a mixed lot. Glamorous young women dressed in the striking creations of Nigeria's avant-garde designers carried themselves with an air of established celebrity. Many others, however, were dressed in the trickle-down garments of American mission charity that are the standard attire of Nigeria's poor. Among the would-be actors, I watched one particularly thin young man stare longingly at the large bowl of steamed rice provided for the brightly colored tropical birds in the large aviary next to the pavilion. The auditions were grouped by age and sex, and the categories they used were young men, elders, girls, and mothers. Actors performed a short section of script and a cold reading as OJ and Kabat evaluated their performance. Kabat facilitated the event, cajoling, commanding, and quieting the crowd and performers as needed. OJ silently observed. Kabat was the one who would ultimately make the casting decisions. OJ's concern at this stage was to expedite practical elements of production. Since the drama was set in a pre-colonial village, they needed a location that would evoke the stereotypical idyllic image of traditional life. An ideal site had been located outside Enugu. OJ, however, had to negotiate with village elders to secure the rights to shoot in the village and the surrounding bush. Ultimately, a deal was struck. OJ could use the site for his movie in exchange for paying to regrade the road into the village that had been left to deteriorate. I learned that this arrangement is a common one. In a country where rural roads are virtually never graded without recourse to nepotism or bribery, this practice is one of the many ways that the video industry creates alternative development strategies for the country's neglected citizenry. The casts of Nigerian videos are relatively older than a typical Hollywood production. This is true in part because the audience demographic is substantially older in Nigeria than the teenage target audience of typical American blockbusters. Nigerian plots often revolve around the deliberations of elder councils and the machinations of mothers-in-law. For this reason, acting is becoming a viable option for former teachers and other civil servants who are left stranded by Nigeria's mandatory retirement policy that puts many well-educated people out of work at 50. Acting, however, is only a small part of the industry's contribution to employment. On the set of Ebube, countless people worked in a range of supporting roles. The costumers area hummed with activities as women with modern Chinese foot-treadle sewing machines fit costumes on the spot. Makeup artists and hairdressers put finishing touches on elaborate outfits for pre-colonial chiefs, native doctors, and warriors. Set builders created a traditional village complete with elders' meeting house in the bush, and teams of technical specialists managed video and sound equipment. At the center of it all, excuse me, a large kitchen staff kept massive pots of rice and soup cooking to continually feed the large cast and crew. A 2002 study by the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Nigeria estimated that the industry has created some 3,000 to 4,000 jobs. I think this figure is quite conservative, and it doesn't include the jobs in movie posters and package printing, distribution and the retailing of millions of videos a year. Regardless of the figures, it is clear that the video industry is becoming a significant new source of employment for Nigerians. Some 90% of Nigeria's GNP comes from petroleum, an industry that produces billions in revenue but negligible employment. When Nigeria was under colonial rule, the exportation of palm oil, coal, and other resources under the military hegemony of the British characterized a system of resource extraction that inherited much in structure from the economy of violence that took slaves from Nigeria in the centuries prior. In the current neo-colonial arrangement, the petroleum industry now dominates the formal economy. The slave trade, colonial mines and plantations, and the petroleum industry all share one distinctive and pernicious character. They have in common an economic arrangement in which the extraction of raw materials for consumption elsewhere is accomplished without generating significant economic development in Nigeria itself. Few jobs, no peripheral industries to speak of, and save for the petroleum subsidy that provides cheap gasoline for Nigerian cars, little direct enhancement of Nigerian lives. Post-colonial rule in Nigeria has reproduced the worst characteristics of colonial rule. Brutally undemocratic militarism, bureaucratic indifference, and a wealthy kleptocratic elite are the legacy of colonialism in Nigeria. There are more universities in Nigeria than the rest of sub-Saharan Africa combined, but the graduates have no place to go. Many join the exodus of Nigerian intellectuals to other countries, the so-called brain drain. More disturbing, however, are the stories, now common, of aggravated college graduates, heavy with hopelessness and campus cult affiliations that turn to armed robbery in the hire of corrupt elites. Nigeria is a nation whose substantial putative wealth remains resolutely out of the reach of anyone who would choose to pursue a legitimate career. It is hard to imagine a system in which affluence is more radically alienated from any sense of relation to labor. It is a nation where the educated run the risk of becoming beggars and thieves, while a small cadre of well-connected thugs control access to the oil wealth. In this environment, the booming video industry looks like manna from heaven. Stories persist that drug smugglers fund the video industry. These rumors, however, are largely the product of hardened incredulity that any wealth could be legitimate in Nigeria. In a country where entrepreneurial imagination is high and economic opportunities are few, the video industry has created the possibility for what might be called a Nigerian dream, a genuine opportunity for legitimate financial success and even celebrity, open to virtually anyone with talent and imagination. While Enugu is a great place to shoot a film, Lagos remains the dream factory. Located in southwest Nigeria, Lagos is the largest city in sub-Saharan Africa, a metropolis of 13.5 million people. In many ways, Lagos typifies the conditions in Nigeria in general. Immense wealth and abject poverty are not simply juxtaposed, but are forced to share the same inadequate space and lack of infrastructure in their crumbling city. Everyone endures the daily power outages as well as the perpetual traffic jam, the go-slow, as the locals call it. When I first saw Idumota Market, I was stuck in the go-slow on the elevated expressway extending over Lagos Island from Carter Bridge, the oldest bridge connecting the island to the mainland. We were on our way to the Echo Hotel, named after the old Yoruba name for the city. The Echo is Lagos's most exclusive luxury hotel. Most of the patrons are corporate oil executives and people involved in the mysteriously successful Nigerian banking industry. We, on the other hand, were just planning to meet our friend Axel, sip espresso by the pool, and casually observe the high-rolling world of the metropolitan elite. The luxurious comfort of the Echo, however, seemed impossibly far away at that moment. Traffic crawled to a halt, and the damp equatorial air in our ragged Peugeot taxi mixed with a heavy aroma of gasoline and exhaust fumes seeking through the crumpled, rust-pitted shell of the car. Far below the road, I beheld the spectacle of the market. It was as if a large, traditional open market had been squeezed into an urban district crowded with buildings. Yellow vans passed at an almost imperceptible pace through the dense, seemingly unyielding crowds of people. The market spread up the ramps and onto the expressway as vendors, mostly children with their products on their heads and draped over their arms, meandered between the idling cars, selling newspapers, plastic scratch-off cars with wireless telephone codes, cookware, calculators, and candy. The parade of products seemed endless. Our driver was an elderly Yoruba man, dressed elegantly in sky blue brocade from toe to cap, with a startlingly beautiful latticework of decorative scarring on his face and neck. Gesturing, he said, "Idumota Market." Idumota Market is the largest distribution center for Nigerian video movies. The term center is, however, misleading. The distribution of Nigerian videos is quite different from the American corporate franchise model. It is a highly decentralized arrangement diffused through countless small vendors in thousands of local shops, markets, and street stalls. Actually visiting Idumota Market required a guide, and Nduka, son of my good friend Chief Ink, volunteered to take us. Smart, handsome, and wryly good-natured, Nduka had just graduated from the University of Calabar with a degree in chemistry, and now found himself, like many Nigerians his age, well-educated, unemployed, and looking for a break. As we approached Idumota, our driver told us that he would not enter the marketplace. Indeed, he could not, given the complex amalgam of patronage, territorial claims, and customary bribery that held sway there. He dropped us off at the edge of the vast bazaar, and we made our way through the crowds on foot. The air was filled with a cacophony of shouting, laughter, and music wafting from countless boomboxes. American hip-hop gave way to Yoruba juju music. Then all sound yielded to the massive speakers in front of a CD shop, a spunky song of perseverance sung by Dolly Parton. Women dressed in vibrant wax print cloths sold jewelry and appliances on the sidewalk. A man with a massive widescreen television on his head jostled his way through the throng. A Muslim woman draped in purdah from head to foot passed silently like a black shadow through the color and noise surrounding her. Each breath brought surprises as the humid air revealed a dense array of odors. Dried fish, gasoline, raw sewage, and frying meat hung in the air. Countless scents as plentiful and varied as the trader's product. Hard, intimidating young men barked at Nduka, but ignored my fellow researcher and me. We were Oyibo, white people, and we passed undisturbed. Nduka walked with exaggerated swagger and exuded an air of authority as he ignored these hustlers who were trying to extort tribute from him. Later, he explained how important it was to keep a tough facade. He told us he feared these area boys. Inhabiting some vague middle ground between criminal thug and informal law enforcement, they were essentially gang members patrolling their respective sections of the market. The video vendors were located in a subterranean labyrinth that sprawled beneath the shells of buildings that had been constructed for some other long-forgotten purpose. In these dim corridors, uneven and rutted mud paths meandered between seemingly countless tiny stalls, each with its own proprietor with his or her collection of videos. This underground world was dark and dank. Rivulets of water carved meandering crevices down the paths. Old planks formed makeshift bridges across channels and puddles. The stale air had an earthy stench with an occasional hint of urine. Vendors shouted at us as we passed, "Come see, I have what you want." My request for particular titles generated interest and cautionary remarks. "That one is very old. It is hard to find now." Somehow, however, the ragged-clothed youngsters who ran off down the paths that seemed to spread like tentacles from every point in this baffling, surreal catacombs would always return clutching the rare movie, hand it to the vendor, and then the haggling would begin. The final price rarely strayed from the 300 to 400 naira, which is about $2.50 to $3. I had already become accustomed to paying for videos. The harsh tropical sun was startling when we finally emerged from the video underworld, but I was relieved to be back outside again. We hiked across the market and finally found a taxi to take us back to the suburbs across the bridge. It was dark by the time we got home. Though exhausting, the excursion had been rewarding beyond my imagination. I had found every video on my list, and some more as well. Now let me tell you of another gridlock. This time I was stuck in the afternoon go-slow on Victoria Island, the most affluent section of Lagos. Traffic in Nigeria is virtually unregulated. There are no lanes or right-of-way signs in this metropolis with a population density to rival New York's. And I've never seen a functional traffic signal. Every vehicle was engaged in a war of position with all others, lurching toward any potential opening with mere centimeters of clearance. Our host that day was Axel Harnett-Sievers, the director of the Heinrich Böll Foundation, an NGO affiliated with the German Green Party. As his driver maneuvered expertly through the seemingly impossible traffic, Axel expounded on the failure of urban planning in Lagos. Victoria Island, he explained, was originally designed as a residential area. Neighboring Lagos Island was the home of Nigeria's business sector, and an impressive skyline of corporate high-rise towers once marked it as one of West Africa's largest centers of commerce. As Lagos Island aged, however, the buildings were left to deteriorate. Rather than renovate or rebuild, businesses moved one by one across the bridge to Victoria Island, a district that was never designed to accommodate the high-density activity that accompanied the new office buildings. Traffic congestion became endemic. Abandoned, Lagos Island degenerated into a shabby monument to the shattered hopes of the oil boom years of the 80s. Some of the buildings stand empty, the streets now patrolled by area boys. In Idumota district, where a vital market grew up without official sanction, the decaying structures have shifted from what economists call the formal sector, dominated by petroleum, banking, and construction, to the informal sector, characterized by countless petty traders who market most of the products actually consumed by Nigerians. This so-called informal economy is the home of the video industry. Positioned in a largely unregulated economic never-never land, the video industry grows and prospers below the radar of standard economic indicators. Lagos was once the capital of Nigeria, but in 1991, the federal government left the city and moved to a carefully designed capital complex in Abuja, far to the northeast. While the north-south political geography played a significant role in the relocation of the capital to a central and putatively neutral location, one cannot but feel that a government both unable and unwilling to repair the city abandoned it. In spite of the traffic, Axel's driver skillfully inched his way to our destination. We arrived at length at the luxurious Cactus Restaurant, a delightful scene of well-dressed children with painted faces and balloons celebrating a birthday greeted us. A large, carefully aimed window revealed a peaceful bay dotted with sailboats. As we sipped excellent iced cappuccinos, I commented that I was amazed that urban traffic without signs, signals, laws, or even a shared understanding of right-of-way could work. But it doesn't work, Axel exclaimed with the adamancy of someone who was winding up for one of his favorite arguments. Now a quote from Axel. Lagos traffic refutes the laissez-faire philosophy that an unregulated system will naturally achieve efficiency. Each driver looking for his opening, each individual seeking his own advantage results in gridlock. People say there are too many cars in Lagos. There are not too many cars. If people would yield right-of-way and resist pushing into every space, traffic could move smoothly. Indeed, the problems arising from lack of regulation are familiar to most Nigerians. Nigeria is, in effect, a kind of object lesson in the limits of laissez-faire arrangements. In a country where the government is not even interested in regulating traffic, it is hard to imagine them taking an interest in the movie industry. As a result of unregulated production, the Nigerian video industry was experiencing a go-slow of its own. In fact, at the end of February 2002, the video producers agreed to a self-imposed recess in production because there were simply too many people making too many movies. As Zebejiro, head of Nigeria's New Directors Guild, told New York Times reporter Matt Steinglass, and this is a quote from that article, in the old days, 5 or 6 years ago, a successful film could sell 100,000 or even 200,000 copies. But in December, more than 60 movies came out and none sold even 20,000. They all crashed. The market is saturated. The video marketers called the recess to allow them to stagger the release of the backlog of movies. Other industry professionals, however, embraced it as a grace period for retooling and reorganizing to move the industry toward fewer but better movies. One important development was the organization of professional guilds for directors, writers, and actors. It was the first time that the loose conglomerate of free agents involved in the various aspects of the creation and distribution of the videos had ever done anything as a cohesive industry. Most members of the video industry recognized that they couldn't wait for government to provide regulation or direction. Early attempts at government regulation resulted in little more than calls for censorship. Haynes writes that in 1992, when videos were still a fledgling offshoot of Yoruba popular theater and not yet the marketing phenomena it is today, a workshop of the Federal Nigerian Film Corporation saw an odd coalition of progressive academics and conservative bureaucrats push to censor the popular videos. And here's a quote from Jonathan Haynes on that. Embarrassment and chagrin at finding that Nigerian cinema had come to mean atrociously made films about witch doctors and adultery led to proposals for censorship, including one suggesting that films liable to convey a negative image of Nigeria abroad through their technical quality and or cultural content be denied a license necessary for exporting the film. Preoccupied with oil revenues and political unrest and bound by a sprawling, inefficient bureaucracy so rife with corruption as to be worse than merely useless, Nigeria's government has little time to devote to nurturing the promise of the budding video movie industry. Given the bleak conditions of the Nigerian economy, however, the video industry is something of a miracle. The sheer scale of production and the rapid growth of the industry make it one of the most important economic developments in Nigeria since the exploitation of petroleum. Movies can be made on a very small investment. Some of the classics were made on budgets that could be calculated in hundreds of dollars. Now $20,000 is average and $50,000 to $100,000 is a big budget production. The 43rd annual meeting of the Committee for Relevant Art was held in Lagos in 2002. This gathering became an open forum for discussing the video industry and its future. The theme was the Nigerian video industry, a new direction. The discussions ranged from needs for professional guilds to the vexing problem of video piracy, a problem that they petitioned the government to regulate. In the end, the recess lasted 4 months. March through June of 2002. When movie production reconvened, the various professional guilds were in place, but little had been accomplished towards piracy control, and government has remained unwavering in its indifference. The assessment of the new industry was not limited to insiders. One of the most significant critical voices took the form of a petition to the industry from Ohaneze Ndi Igbo, the paramount council of prominent Igbo elders who act as the official mediators of Igbo culture. I had the opportunity to discuss the petition with the late Victor Nwanko, a member of the Elite's Elders Council and director of Fourth Dimension Publishing, the oldest and most prestigious independent publishing house in Africa. Nwanko observed that Ohaneze Ndi Igbo became concerned when they heard about that a series of murders had occurred in Ghana and that the expatriate Igbo community was implicated purely because the crimes resembled fictional ritual murders depicted in some of the English language Igbo videos now popular in Ghana. The assumption was that the movies represented typical Igbo cultural practice. The Igbo Council was concerned that the violence and ritualism so common in the movies was distorting the Igbo image abroad. In Nwanko's words, and here's a quote from Victor Nwanko, "They are not doing us any good at all with this kind of bad publicity. More so when they are false depictions of the Igbo way of life. We have noticed recently, whether it's because of our intervention, I cannot tell, but we have noticed recently that these films have become more positive and have begun to show Christian life and the more moral values in the way people sought to progress and advance themselves." It's the end of Nwanko's quote. Debates about the content of the movies, and especially the impression the movies give of Nigeria and her various cultures, are now a common topic for newspaper editorials, sermons, and television talk shows. In Igbo land, they have become a key reference point for ongoing discussions of what it means to be Igbo. In a broader sense, they have given many Nigerians a means to wonder what, if anything, it means to be Nigerian. Unpredicted and unpredictable, the Nigerian video boom is too new and vital for anyone to foresee just how it will shape popular culture on the continent. One thing, however, is clear. Scholarship on Nigerian video movies cannot afford to reproduce the habits of traditional scholarship on African cinema. That is, we cannot focus only on the content of cinematic narratives, the artistry of production, and comparisons to literature. These habits of scholarship were developed to discuss a cinema that had little significant African audience and negligible impact on African lives. Nigerian videos, however, are in direct dialogue with their African audience. They are an extremely significant development in the African mediascape, the impact of which is yet to be measured. The growing industry itself is quickly reshaping assumptions about the role of media in development, the economy, and the emergence of a Nigerian national identity. As distribution becomes continent-wide, the videos appear to be contributing to an emergent pan-African popular culture in a pattern consistent with recent directions in the African music industry. The movies coalesce popular opinion, folklore, current events, and the complex crises of contemporary Africa more effectively and problematically than anything that has come before. The humble origins of the industry and the lack of big funding or foreign investment mean that the movies remain technically and aesthetically raw from a Westerner's point of view. To anyone with an interest in local perspectives, however, the technological shortcomings are more than offset by the strikingly indigenous character of the movies themselves. The productions effectively use a cinematic imagination to capture the hopes and fears of modern Africans better than anything that has come before. While quality is uneven at best, the industry is less than 2 decades old. I contend that we have yet to see what the application of the celebrated Nigerian creative genius to movie making is capable of producing. I think Kabat is right when he says this is the truly African film we have all been waiting for. Kabat knows that the new movie industry is still looking for the brilliant exemplars that will claim their place in cinematic history, and Kabat, like so many other talented Nigerians, wants to take his shot at it. So, I welcome any questions, please.
Yes, please, any questions? These can be questions for information, for clarification. You don't have to, if you don't know what is meant by Yoruba or Igbo, that is a legitimate question. You don't have to wait for faculty to ask their questions first.
Okay.
Okay.
I see one right here.
I was just going to ask, where can we get that information you just read at?
What?
Where can we get the information you just read? Is it like on a website or something?
This actually, most of what I just read was published in a journal called Transition. So I think you can probably get it at the library. However, if you go to my website, you can also get a PDF file of that transition article. It's probably the easiest way to do it, which would, that's what, anthropology. Go to the SIU anthropology site, go to faculty, find me. You'll get to it. It's down at the bottom of my webpage. Actually, if you're interested in my work, most of my published work is available in PDF form off that website.
Nice and loud because they have to hear.
Okay. You said that the movie industry down there is being produced by drug smugglers, did I hear that right?
No, I said there were rumors of that, which I credited not to, and I'm sure there probably was some drug money occasionally. It would find its way into it. However, I think it's really part of the lore about the industry that is related to the fact that people just can't believe that you can make money in Nigeria without being involved in crime. There is such, and this is a I think a product of the sort of government. The term kleptocracy, I believe, and I can't confirm this, but I think it was coined by Nigerian journalists, and if it wasn't, it probably should have been, because there's no better example of a kleptocratic government. In other words, kleptocracy meaning what it sounds like, rule by thieves. So much of the wealth in Nigeria is money that in one way or another has been embezzled or expropriated from Nigerian, from petroleum income, and has found its way into private coffers when in fact they were public monies, because the oil industry has been owned by the government. It's a nationalized industry, strangely enough. There are so few legitimate opportunities to actually become wealthy, to make substantial money, that the success of the industry already set it up to be, people started looking for where's the crime, how is this being paid for? The idea of generating money simply by reinvesting capital is not really a very well developed idea in the imagination of your average Nigerian. Just because there's so few opportunities for that kind of capitalist magic to work.
Yeah. More questions? Yes.
I know in the north of Nigeria, there's Sharia law has been installed in some of the provinces. How do those governments deal with this rather wild and woolly and sometimes very sexual imagery in these videos?
This is a good question, and it's something that I don't lay out I didn't lay out in this presentation, but the North really has its own video industry. And in the North, they very rarely watch the English language videos. Very rarely get that far north, but you can get Hausa language videos, which are produced in the North. And Kano is the center of the industry up there. And those movies, which there's an anthropologist named Brian Larkin, who's actually the one who's done substantial research up there. Okay, yes. There are videos produced in the North in Hausa language, which are Muslim in their sort of moral view of the world. And what Larkin points out, and I think that one of the most interesting things about these videos, on one hand you can look at it and say, well, they've got this sort of contained and more repressed form of video happening in the North. But in fact, the marketers, just like the marketers in the South, they're keenly attuned to who their audience is, and their belief, at least, and I think it's probably an accurate one, is it's mostly women. And this is one of the interesting things. The video industry has, there used to be movie theaters, cinema houses in Nigeria. Almost all of them have closed and become churches because going out to get entertainment in public spaces, particularly in the cities, it's too rough now. And particularly in the North, it was certainly no place that a woman would ever want to be seen in a movie theater. That would, only you would be considered a prostitute to be seen going to a movie theater. However, videos watched at home in domestic space is just fine. And so it's designed to be consumed in a very different kind of space, in a domestic space. And the marketers, knowing that the Hausa women are the primary market, they target the stories to women, and in fact, in order to do that, have to hire women actors, and also they have many of the screenwriters are women. They're writing the stories. So as Larkin points out, it's actually created a lot of opportunities for Muslim women in the North for kinds of work, and also just a whole world of sort of feminized expressive culture that just wasn't there even 15 years ago.
Yes, Rachel.
What about marketing campaigns? Since are there movie posters or graphics to go along with this with these marketers, or how do they do this? How do they get the word out?
Posters are a big thing, and some of you, I don't know if any of you were around so long ago that you saw the museum exhibit that I did, I guess back in, must have been 2000, where we had some popular folk posters up from Nigeria. And I collected these sort of folkloric posters that were, you saw them everywhere in Nigeria. When I went back 2 years later, they were gone. And people said, oh, you can't get those anymore. Even though they had been produced for actually, I think almost 20 years that this industry was going. The poster printers were so swamped with movie poster orders that they'd just given up the other stuff. So the entire poster printing industry was basically taken over by Nollywood, printing these, and they print big, glossy, beautiful posters and just plaster them all over everything. When you're driving in Lagos or in Enugu, any of the cities, but even in the villages, you go by the side of a building just covered with movie posters. Trailers, always a very effective way to market movies, and you saw some of those. So they use movies to sell other movies and the sequels to those movies. The popular movies always have a second, third, fourth sequel. I was just reading that there was some talk about the government banning sequels because there were so many complaints about how many there were and how terrible they were. Although I have to admit, I am puzzled by when I have discussions with Nigerians in the industry, and they're always so interested in getting the government involved in the movie industry. And we want support from the government, but they, and I literally said, the government is going to put restrictions, limits. They're going to, the more you get them involved, the more they will start trying to run it themselves. I think Nigerians are just so hopeful that someday they will have a government that actually, gets up and does something other than transferring petroleum profits into private accounts. They're just really, they're prodding it to say, come on, recognize that we're important and that we're a part of the economy and that we need to be taken seriously. And there actually have been now a number of cases of the Nigerian government in official documents and development directives and things like that, making special mention of the movie industry. As far as what's actually been done, other than proclamations and that kind of thing, I think there's been very little actually. But did I not?
No, I have just one kind of another question associated with this. So, how about the idea of movie posters for resale? Has that started yet, or do you see that as something that will happen?
Things that people just collecting posters.
For resale.
Actually, because I of course wanted to bring home a big bundle of movie posters, among other things, with me. I tried to do that and found that it was very difficult to get your hands on them. They weren't used to the idea of anyone wanting the posters except the movie marketers who would send workers off to plaster them all over everything. But there really wasn't the idea, and I didn't see movie posters up in people's houses or college dorm rooms or the kind of places that you might expect to see them. I didn't see any of that. But I think as the star system and the cults of celebrity, which are really taking off big time in Nigeria, as that develops, I think more and more we're going to see, the college students with their posters of Genevieve Nnaji and other, the big, beautiful movie stars, get those up in their dorm rooms. I would imagine. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened, but no, not yet.
Okay, I have a question. Having grown up in the States, I've kind of been conditioned, to expect a certain type of movie, and I think it's been from the blockbuster era, So I want to know, as far as the look of the film over there is significantly different. How much of that is because of their culture, and how much of it is because of the economic status? And do you see them as behind our industry, or do you see them, catching up to our industry? And can you discuss that?
Well, that last little tag on there, actually, maybe I'll address that first. I think that in certain ways, to talk about behind or whatever, I think in certain ways Nollywood is ahead of everyone. Certainly not, well, even in terms of the technology, I mean, face it, although digital technologies are used more and more in the production, we are still stuck with a 20th century chemical process for projecting most movies in theaters. And the Nigerians have said, to hell with that. Digital is the way of the future, and they are right. And in 25 years, Karasodas will be projecting digitally. Yeah, well, I'm trying to, I'm in a room full of industry professionals. I didn't want somebody to come in and go, well, so they're skipping that. They're leapfrogging in that sense. So, and also, they are doing something with marketing that really has never exactly been done before. It started out with, as I said, with people kind of informally exchanging videotapes in Lagos. They are now producing hundreds of movies, hundreds in fact every month, and distributing them without ever engaging, and they're distributing them now all over the continent and increasingly on other continents. You can buy these in major cities in this country, but also in Europe and Asia. You can get these movies. The audience abroad is mostly expatriate Africans who are looking for a little piece of home, and so you have to say that they are behind. I think is, the movies look crude to us, which is both a factor of economy and then also, it took me a long time to figure out that many of the peculiarities of Nigerian movies are better understood once you sort of get inside what they're actually trying to do, the sort of cultural assumptions behind them. And even for me, who I'd been doing ethnographic research in Nigeria for since the late 80s. But this is a popular cinema. These are, and as I say, they make hundreds of these movies. Most of them, even the biggest movie lover in Nigeria who just watches these movies, with not a high level of sort of critical sensibilities, even a person like that will tell you that most of them aren't worth watching. But when you have, but that's probably true of any movie industry, isn't it? There are those, even with people that are trying very hard to make art films, a lot of them just don't work. These are movies that are produced hastily. Some of them work a lot better than others. Most of them are derivative attempts to reproduce the successes of the movies that did well in the market.
We don't know that yet.
Again, yeah, all of the complaints that we get, that Nigerians have about the movies is that it's the same actors over and over again, the same stars, that there's too much violence, and that's bad for children, that there's no imagination, just reworking of the same formulas. All of these are very familiar to anyone that has been listening to what people have to say about American movies. Did I answer your question yet? I guess before I go to the next one, there's one other thing I think I should say, because you had kind of several parts to your question, and I seized upon your last comment. As far as looking at it and trying to identify, well, what here is a product of African culture, or Nigerianness or Yoruba-ness, or an Igbo perspective or something, and how much of it is just a matter of the technologies and that kind of thing. There's also the people that make these movies aren't producing them in a vacuum. They've watched lots of American movies. They've watched actually a lot of Bollywood movies, which have been very popular in Nigeria for some time. They've seen a lot of American television as well, which found its way into Nigerian television, and the full range of American television. They're very familiar with bad American television. When I was first in Nigeria back in the 80s, and I sat down with a professor in his home for the evening. He was entertaining me. I was on campus at the University of Nigeria. And we sat down, and he turned on the TV, and it was The Love Boat was the show. And he sat down and he smiled and he says, "This is how I learn about life in America." And so, but all of this, all of these are resources, and they have, they're familiar with the popular American movies. When you just watch broadcast television in Nigeria, you're liable to run, see Scarface and these kinds of sort of classic popular American films. So all of that is part of this repertoire that they work with of what a film can look like. And so you see them drawing on that. It's not just a sort of translation of African culture into a cinematic form, but they're using the various tools, cinematic tools, ideas of how to conceive a film, how to organize a film narrative that's coming from a lot of different sources, and those are used very opportunistically, but then also blended with indigenous narrative structures and styles and even contents. Sometimes just histories and folktales and stuff will be transformed into film. One of the things that I think the trailers didn't really give you a sense of, one of the most popular trends in the movies is actually basing things on events that are going on. If there was a big scandal where a church leader was found to be backing an gang of armed robbers. He was a very popular, charismatic religious leader who turned out to be a criminal. And it was all over the newspapers. There was a vigilante group involved in the unmasking of this thing, and it was just quite a wild story. Within about 3 weeks, you could get the video. And they took the story, they lightly fictionalized it, but mostly, just like, it's the ripped from the headline kind of approach. So there's a lot of things going on that shape the way the movies ultimately look. But if you ask the marketers, the real bottom line is that they just try to produce what they think the public wants.
I'll take one more question. Before I take it, just let me give you the announcement. This time next week, there will be another presentation by Shafiqur Rahman, a doctor on candidate former journalist in Bangladesh. You may or may not know, but back in last August, there was a sudden sort of series, all in one day, of some 300 small bombs set off throughout Bangladesh, which is not known this kind of stuff before, identified with a jihadi group. And what he's looking at is how the Bangladeshi news media process this quite unexpected and unprecedented event. So that'll be here at 4:30 next Monday. Last question. Jay.
John, I'm wondering, you really wonderfully describe a kind of a narrative identity, I think, which you were just kind of describing a little bit more in detail. And I'm wondering if there's an intersection, too. You've also described this movement towards this narrative production a la digital. And I'm wondering, in Africa, how are things assimilating with digital culture, right? In the West, a la Wired magazine, it's this sort of hyper-caffeinated, ultra expensive, you know, kind of fetish object, right? As it comes into consideration with film and Hollywood, but how is the television and narrative structure maybe being shaped by some of the digital technology as well?
How is narrative structure shaped by digital technology? I'm not sure. There are a lot of ways that digital technology is just changing. And if you heard Dr. Alzuma's presentation, well, I guess it's been what, 3 weeks ago on internet and digital phones, or cell phones. That kind of thing has had incredible impact, and in fact becomes then a topic for reflection in the movies. The phones over there, they use a European system called GSM, which is pretty common, but the word GSM then just refers to cellular telephony in general in Nigeria. And it's also a term that comes up in movie titles all the time. There are whole films that are sort of around the fact of these cell phones and the lifestyle of people who depend on them. And it's associated with that fast lane life of Lagos and everything, even though in fact everybody has them. People, they're really not limited to the rich anymore, which is something that Godot also talked about. I think that was probably true to a certain extent, but very quickly it's become the kind of thing that at least people living in the cities where you know, they have access to the cellular systems. You find, you know, everybody kind of using them or having access to them. The one family will have a phone and it kind of gets circulated.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Jay was talking about digital production, shooting, camera technology, and editing technology.
Or just storytelling, how people assimilate.
Well, see, they're really
shape the narratives in the future.
I'm not sure that it really matters whether a camera has film in it or tape, digital, you know, tape in it when you're actually shooting the movie. Now, I will say this, and as far as, I can't talk about change because there really wasn't, I mean, please, my apologies to Ola Balogun, but there really has never been a celluloid cinema in Nigeria to speak of. But one of I think the major problems right now in the way Nollywood works is that for the most part, and this, with the exception of a few directors like Tunde Kalani and Izu Ojukwu, who control the production process from beginning to end, where the director actually has production control in a way that I think more familiar to the way the Hollywood system works. You don't see a lot of attention. There's no cult of director in Nollywood. It's all, you know, the celebrity is attached to actors. And there's various reasons for that, but one of them is that the Nollywood directors really don't. They direct the shooting and then they're out of the picture. The tape goes to Lagos. It goes to an editing factory where you have hacks sitting there with you know, sort of sketched out instructions who just throw these things together. And sometimes you know, you can see, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've watched these movies and say, boy, this would be a great movie if you edited about a half an hour out of it and just tightened it up and made it work. It's just you know, it's like you're watching the raw footage. And I think editing, and this I think is more along the lines of what you're talking about, because digital editing is a different kind of process, and it's now become actually wonderfully easy. Since you can do it on computers, it's become, and as you could see from the trailers, special effects very popular, and they will always announce who the special effects are by in the movies, because there are these, again, these people in Lagos, they're not under the direction of the director, they're kind of on their own. They just and so there's a kind of, and I think I mentioned this before, there was hardly a sense of an industry itself. There were just all these different little professional groups that would do one part or another, and somehow in the end there would be a movie, but there was an incredible lack of any oversight except for the marketer who was paying for it, who they always, the people in the industry characterize the marketers as being these sort of illiterate market people who don't know anything about art or cinema or anything else. They're just trying to make money. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but there's also a bit of truth in that. There's a kind of, the real artists in the industry have a hard time controlling what their end product looks like. And that, I think, you know, does have to do with the technology to a certain extent, but really has more to do with the social organization and of Nollywood and the industry organization, which is changing. And as we see directors like Kalani and Ojukwu who have an artistic vision that connects with the audiences, we're going to start seeing more people like them and more directorial control. That's, at least that's my half-baked prediction.
John, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for giving me the chance.